Just Google these words, China's population in the world, and after seeing the result, just think for a minute. How can 18% of the world's population live under an undemocratic system which tries to control all the aspects of their lives? If this much population was controlled by 10 different political parties in 10 different countries, it would have made more sense. But controlled and governed by just one political party, it's just unbelievable. What explains this mindset? There must be an explanation. Let's jump into it. There is a theory called the butterfly effect. It states that even a small change can make much bigger changes happen. One small incident can have a big impact on the future. The term butterfly effect comes from an analogy where a butterfly flaps its wings in Tokyo and tornado occurs in Tennessee. Human history is full of such successive events. Throughout our history, big moments of change have often started with tiny events or personal decisions that ended up affecting the history of our world. In history, we study people who are responsible for creating the world we live in today. One such ancient personality can partly be blamed for influencing the Chinese political philosophy and psychology. His intentions were good, but most often people misunderstand philosophy, or in the political context, they just exploit the philosophies propagated by the great minds to fulfill their personal agendas or to pursue their self-interest. After all, we humans are good at twisting beautiful philosophies for justifying our deeds. Hi guys, I am Pratik and you are watching Eclectic. Here we talk about our past, present and the future. And in today's video, let us delve into our past to learn some important lessons about political manipulation. Our story begins roughly 2500 years ago when China was divided into 200 small more or less independent states and was under a political system identical to the West of the Middle Ages. One such independent state called the state of Lu was located on the banks of the Yellow River, where a 19-year-old youngster who will later be known as the Confucius used to work as an attendant of granaries for the Lu province. As he grew up, he worked his way gradually up through the ranks to become Minister of Public Works. Confucius was a born administrator. He was fair, upright, honest and rigorous. For him, politics was not for personal advantage but for improving the lives of the people. In simple words, he was a true statesman. Confucius aspired to create an ideal and just government. For the majority of his life, Confucius worked for the sovereign of Lu. However, after the age of 50, while Confucius was working as the Minister of Justice in Lu province, a major event unfolded. An event that would eventually make Confucius take a decisive step. A personal choice that would fundamentally change the course of our world history. A choice that has influenced almost the past 2500 years of Chinese history and is still influencing Chinese politics and how China interacts with the rest of the world. While Confucius was serving the sovereign of Lu, his administration brought stability, morality and wealth. When neighboring provinces witnessed this prosperity, they got envious. They somehow wanted to eliminate Confucius. At first, they tried to bribe him, but Confucius was incorruptible. They even tried to assassinate him but failed at that too. So after years of failed attempts, neighboring provinces finally devised a new plan. They thought, if we cannot corrupt Confucius, then why don't we just focus all our efforts on corrupting the Duke Ding of the Liu state? The governors of neighboring provinces reportedly offered 18 of their country's prettiest girls to the sovereign of Lu, and as happens with the most men, sovereign of Lu surrendered himself to the earthly pleasures. Food, women and wine, that's all he cared about. He neglected his duties for days at a time. Confucius tried to stop him, but he wouldn't listen. Disgusted and disappointed, Confucius arrived at a turning point. This was a kind of moment that we all face in our lives at some point, where we get two choices. Either we keep our head down and helplessly endure everything, or we stand up for ourselves and our ideals and do something that would make some difference. If we were in the Confucius' place, many of us would have thought, why should I care so much about the welfare of Lu province? I am getting paid, that's good enough. But Confucius acted like any other enlightened person would act. He stood up for his values and ideas and decided to leave the Lu province at the age of 57. And so began his journey, a lifelong quest with the purpose of establishing a just and ideal political system. For the next decade, Confucius traveled extensively, visiting various provinces to advise princes on good government, morality and ancient Chinese traditions. Confucius firmly believed in the ancient Chinese ways of life. He never regarded the philosophies that he propagated as his. Instead, he credited ancient Chinese sages for his philosophy. He drew inspiration from ancestral Chinese traditions and gradually through experience came up with a sort of moral code that he taught his disciples. Soon many scholars from across China started coming to him to learn his philosophy and to become his disciples. Some of his influential disciples even helped him in spreading his ideas all across China. Now many of you must be wondering, what exactly was his philosophy? What exactly did he teach? Why is it so important? And how exactly did it influence the 2500 years of our history? Forget about the history, it is still influencing our present to this very day. What is this so-called Confucianism? If Confucius was alive today, people would have labeled him as conservative and old-fashioned, partly because he believed in the ancient Chinese traditions and way of life. Confucius established a philosophy based on his belief in the basic order of the universe. He urged people to follow the traditional ways that worked well in the past to achieve social peace and harmony. He gave importance to ceremonies, rituals, and obedience. Confucianism refers to practical way of living that focuses on morality and ethics. According to it, the more one is morally harmonious within, the more cosmic harmony there is. But morality itself is different for different philosophers and religions. According to Confucianism, a person reflects moral behavior if he or she knows his or her place in society and acts accordingly. So basically, he believed in superiors and inferiors. In our modern society, we believe that everyone is created equal and everyone has a right to say and do whatever he or she likes. We generally reject hierarchical roles. Confucius, on the other hand, taught his followers that the relationship between superiors and inferiors is like that of between the wind and the grass. The grass must bend when the wind blows across it. He meant that bending gracefully is not a sign of weakness, but a gesture of humility and respect. In the political context, he argued that emperors must get inspired by the ancient sage emperors. According to him, following ancients' moral behavior is the only way of bringing harmony and stability to China. We can easily classify Confucius' teachings into two categories, for the common people and for the state or emperor. Confucius regarded ruler as the father of a nation. For him, an ideal ruler must be a virtuous ruler and he should be able to exercise self-control. To govern, a ruler must not use excessive violence. Just setting an example would be sufficient and people will follow. As far as the common people were concerned, Confucius did not give much importance to individual freedom. He preferred collective good over individual freedom. That means what is good for the state must be good for its subjects. Confucius expected people to obey and accept the authority of emperors. Within a political context, this respect for the authority becomes submission, absolute devotion to the prince, the king, or the emperor. Most Chinese emperors were only interested in the obedience part of his teachings. They expected people to obey and accept their authority, but did very little to improve themselves and their governance. So the importance allotted to respect Father and the Lord was largely adopted and expanded by all the successive kings and emperors. The Chinese rulers cherry-picked Confucian values that served their purpose and ignored the rest, such as working on oneself, self-control, and fair governance. Let us imagine a man with the wisdom of Confucius is living with us in the 21st century. He is traveling from one country to another, visiting prime ministers and presidents to advise them on how to run their country. Would they really listen to him? Would they actually put his ideas about ideal governance into practice? And above all, will they learn to leave behind all their personal ambitions and try to become fair and morally upright statesmen as envisioned by Confucius? I don't think so. His visits would purely remain symbolic and would not have any subsequent effects. It seems after all these centuries, we humans have not changed much. But hey, look on the bright side. Today, most of us have the right to choose our leaders. At least that's what we choose to believe after consuming manipulated and twisted information from variety of media outlets and social media platforms. Are we really making our own decisions while choosing our leaders? Or are our decisions influenced by a variety of external forces that are constantly fighting for our attention? Well, that is the topic for some other day. Anyway, back to the imperial China. Nearly 7 centuries after his death, his disciples compiled his thoughts in the book called Analects. In doing so, they immortalized his thoughts and his philosophy became known as the Confucianism. The Han Dynasty embraced his ideas and made Confucianism the official philosophy of the government. Other dynasties such as Tang Dynasty and Song Dynasty took similar steps to instill Confucius's ideas and philosophy as the dominant school of thought among the populace. Up until 1860, Confucianism remained the official philosophy of China. Government officials had to pass a demanding test based on the writings of Confucius in order to be appointed to the emperor's service. So basically they integrated Confucianism into the Chinese education system to teach people obedience and blind submission to the emperor. They intentionally emphasized on accepting one's place in society and respecting the existing hierarchies. However, in the 19th century, the Chinese elite realized that their country was lagging far behind in terms of technological and social development. They blamed old-fashioned Confucianism for this. In the 1949, at the end of the Civil War, Chairman Mao's Communist Party took control of China and launched the Great Proletarian Revolution with one objective: eradicate all the remains of ancient Chinese society and of Confucian thought.
Old culture, old ideologies, old customs, old traditions, all of the olds must be destroyed.
In the Mao era, Confucianism was labeled backward, counter-revolutionary, reactionary and superstitious. It was linked with feudalism and condemned as a source of evils that plagued traditional China. Chairman Mao went to great lengths to wipe out the memories of Confucius. The authorities burned his books, demolished his statues and did everything they could to wipe out the master's memory. This is what Chairman Mao once said about Confucianism: if a communist party has a day when it cannot rule or has made difficulty and needs to invite Confucius back, it means the party is coming to an end. Maybe Mr. Mao was not aware of the fact I am about to tell you guys. Hear me out. Every political system needs some kind of philosophical, or let's just say ideological backing. All political systems, good and bad alike, are based on some kind of philosophy. Good, bad or twisted philosophy, it does not matter. But there has to have some kind of philosophy in order to create any social or political order. It binds people together. Chairman Mao would have never thought that in just 10 years after his death, his party would need Confucianism to assert or justify its authority. Today, in our globalized world, ideas can spread faster than ever before. We can get to know different people and how they live, how the political systems of various countries function, what are the different political ideologies and what do they offer. We have all this information available at our fingertips, and that is why we can easily compare and differentiate between what works and what doesn't. If we look at the countries like China, North Korea, Vietnam, Cuba and Burma, we get to see how people are living under one party rule. If we look at the Arab countries, we get to see how a monarchy deals with its subjects. And if we look to the West, we get to see Western liberalism, which offers democracy, human rights, individualism and equality. Now imagine this. In a world like this, you are a leader of the Chinese Communist Party and people of your country are showing interest in the Western liberalism. Some might be interested in the individual freedom and some in democracy. How exactly would you maintain your authority over your people? Let me tell you how, by providing an alternative, a philosophy that would suit you, your party and will serve your purpose. Confucianism has made a comeback because the Communist Party is looking for ways to justify its authoritarianism and forge a common Chinese identity. In the 21st century China, Confucian temples and schools have not only been allowed to open up and carry on a wide range of activities, they sometimes receive government money and support to do so. In recent years, Confucius and Confucianism have been the subject of numerous novels, television dramas and films, including the multi-million-dollar biopic Confucius. For centuries after centuries, first the imperial China and now the communist China. In both cases, Chinese political machinery has always exploited Confucianism for three reasons: to forge a common Chinese identity, to make people obey the existing political system and hierarchies, to promote the mentality of preferring the collective good over individual freedom. Current day Chinese regime gets to fulfill their two primary motives by exploiting Confucianism. First, they get to justify their authority, and second, they get an alternative for Western ideas such as democracy. Historians and scholars refer to this kind of Confucianism as institutional Confucianism, which is only interested in strengthening its authority over its people. If Confucius was alive today, would he agree with the Chinese regime? Would he even recognize his philosophy that has been twisted and molded into different versions with the passing of each century, first by the imperialists and now by the communists? I think he won't. In all this political exploitation of his thoughts, lots of important aspects of Confucianism remained untouched, like practicing 5 constant virtues, respecting one another, unconditional respect for parents, being honest and considerate, etc. If a political party or a government sends to jail anyone who dares to utter even a minor criticism of their policies, can they be Confucianists? In Analects, Confucius warns about such Confucianists when he says, look at the person, look at their behavior, and then you will see whether or not they are Confucianists. Okay, let's keep politics aside. I made this video primarily to show you guys how one personal decision can affect the centuries of our world history, and how philosophies and ideologies can be exploited to influence the way people think, the way they make decisions. I wonder what would have happened if Confucius had remained at the Lu court. If he had put aside his values and decided to accept the situation, perhaps the great thinker would have returned home frustrated and in disgrace. Without him there to defend them, his ideas would have sunk into oblivion, and the China of today would have been greatly changed. Imagine a China where the sense of collectivity as desired by Confucius was replaced by individualism, where the importance was placed on the happiness of the person and not on the good of the state. It would have been impossible for the Chinese government to use philosophers' thoughts to make its people accept the current working conditions. Western multinationals would have chosen another more competitive country to set up their manufacturing plants. Made in China would have been far less prominent than it is today. The political balance of the planet as we know it would have been very different. And if we go even further, if we exaggerate a little, maybe, just maybe, China itself may have never come into being. Split into a host of tiny kingdoms, this region of the globe might have resembled Renaissance Europe, and a less united region would have been more open to the outside world. Apart from these philosophical and psychological factors, there is also a robust Chinese political machinery in place to keep people in check. I intend to make a detailed video on Chinese political system, how it controls people, media, and its growing private sector. If you feel I should carry on with my efforts, leave a like or say something about it in the comment section below. If you are economically well off, consider supporting me on patreon.com. This is me, Prateek, signing off. See you in the next video.